Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I would like to tell you a story first. It's my personal story as a designer and how I've gotten a few job offers in the last few years. How I really show my work in a way that actually showcases what my skills are and how I do projects. Basically what I do, right? I was working at an agency that did mostly websites. And over there wasn't really any big UX decisions, advanced stuff as a product or UX designer. My work was mostly visual. So when I moved on to my next job where I was working at Eurocenter, there was a lot more UX work, talking to users, getting feedback from them, understanding their problems. But my mind still hasn't changed in a way how I want to present my work, right? Everything I did was mostly visual, so I also thought that I need to present everything visually. So what I decided to do is I kind of did my portfolio as you see it here on the screen, and I'm just gonna take you through this one first, and then I'm gonna take you to my current portfolio, which needs to be updated, but it's still a lot better. And I'm also gonna tell you the story how I got the upgraded version that landed me my previous job at Hollydo, which is a German startup, and my current job where I currently work. We're gonna take a look at, let's say, what a bad portfolio is, right? And then we're gonna go take a look at what a good portfolio is, which actually showcases what you're good at and how you approach problems and how you solve them. As you can see, it's a Webflow website. It was done at the time when I was really into Webflow. I tried to understand it and use it, and I was also into all of these fancy animations also on scrolling and stuff like that. This is okay, but it's at the end of the day, it's totally useless, as what you're here for is explaining how you work, and what the other designers at a company you're applying for, or the recruiters are here for, is understanding your process of working. Okay, so they're not here for fancy animations, they're not here for fancy designs. They're here to understand what you do and how you do it. So there's nothing wrong with you creating like this sort of animation or anything, but just don't be, your website or your portfolio should not be only about this kinds of stuff. Okay, so let's go down here where, okay, I have a little scroll down to see my works, and I think you can also click on it. Yeah, and this is basically what my portfolio was. So it was just like this random screenshots. They're not even the same size. There's some sizing problems, and then down here you have some other things which are kind of like a lot of scrolling and trying to understand what's going on. Yeah, if we dive into one of my projects, it says how I do product design, but then again we will see that it's not really that detailed, right? So I kind of have a little bit of my process here, which is good, but I think I'm missing icons here, but doesn't matter, because this is actually what the recruiter would see, right? So he would be like, okay, there are just some dots here on the screen, right? So even that, just like attention to detail and everything that's working. But then if we just go forward, it's just like main problems, and I just have like bullet list here and what my proposals were already, right? So I'm just skipping steps. This is not showcasing how I got all of this information, as you can see down here. This is not explaining how I talk to the users, what questions I was asking those users, and then I straight on just jump into wireframes that I did. Okay, of course you can do wireframes, and they are useful in many situations, but I'm not really explaining how I got from all of this research and all of this understanding of problems. So first of all, I'm not explaining how I got that insights, how I talk to users and everything, and then I'm just jumping straight into wireframing without highlighting, okay, I learned this, but then how did I get to this next process, which would be maybe in this case wireframing. I'm just not showcasing any of that work. So what the recruiters or designers do is that they just assume that you just assumed what you need to do, right? So one of the main things basically as designers is you need to make decisions based on your thought processes and your research processes and everything around that. So you kind of really need to have good basis for what you're trying to do. And if I go from just this, just like showing a bullet list of 5 uh, problems and then just jumping straight into wireframes, they're not gonna know that I actually did any other work. They're just gonna say, okay, he did that, but now he just went straight into wireframing. So there's a huge chunk of work missing here that he's not explaining. Or not that he's not explaining, he actually didn't do that work that's missing in the middle, right? So I go from wireframes and then, just like to some design explorations, which is also pretty weird, because I just literally skipped from wireframing to straight up UI basically. And then I tested some prototypes, but which prototypes? What was the UI decisions that I went with? What did I do? And then from all of this, what did I actually learn? So I did testing of my UI, but I'm not showcasing anywhere what I learned, what the feedback was, what my decisions were based on that feedback. I'm not explaining any of them. So if we go back a little bit, then I just have this weird hover over the images to see final designs. What if I don't see this? What if a recruiter doesn't actually see this? Like he's not gonna know. He's just gonna think that I'm showing the same wireframes all over again. So again, I'm just missing a lot of information here, which is definitely not good if you're trying to get hired, right? So then, I did some testing with the final UI, but again, no one knows how I got to the final UI. And again, there's this weird animation going on. If you hover over something, then you can get feedback, right? If you hover on something, you get like the improvement of the new UI, of the final UI I did, right? Let's see if there's anything more. So that's basically it. This is literally, how many slides this is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 slides, and all I do is show 2 screens of wireframes, some hover effect of the weird hover effect of the final UI that I decided to go with, and then kind of like some upgrades or improvements I achieved with testing UI. So all in all, I'm not telling you as a hiring manager, as a designer that is trying to hire someone, I'm not telling you anything. I'm not telling you how I think, how I identify problems, how I then make decisions based on the problems or research or whatever I did. I'm not telling you anything. So why would you kind of hire me with this? You probably wouldn't. Even if you do all of the important things and you do them well, if you don't show them in your portfolio, no one will know that you actually know how to do that, right? No one will know that you're actually a very capable designer that just has a bad portfolio. They will just think that you are not on the level that you are supposed to be on, or on the level that the company is looking for, right? So what you really need to do is go down in the nitty-gritty things about your process. So I'm gonna go into Figma here, and I'm gonna show you my current portfolio, okay? Which again has gotten me 2 jobs and like a few more job offers that I didn't accept. And I've also gotten some feedback that it's one of the best portfolios they've ever seen. And the reason behind I have so good portfolio is because I actually showed the portfolio we were looking before. I actually showed that to a really experienced UX designer, and he gave me tons of feedback. So he was like, you need to change this, you need to change this, you need to talk about your process, you need to talk about what decisions you made, you need to talk about, what problems you came across and how you solved those problems, and how you explored different, variations of your design, and how did you validate those variations, and how did you, let's say, kind of do the final decision, then which final design you go with. Because at the end of the day, you always need to choose a design that you're going to give the developers that they're going to do, that's going to go in your app, that's going to go in your website, whatever, right? So obviously when you're doing UI and UX, you have a lot of ideas, right? And yeah, you need to show how to validate those ideas, how to validate the decisions, and how you came, to the bottom line when you say, okay, this is it, this is what we're going with. Okay, so again, very, very important to showcase your portfolio to experienced designers that really know what they're looking for, that really know what they themselves or the companies look for when they hire for designers, right? They really need to know that, if you are getting the feedback from them. Okay, so my portfolio again, this is the main one. It's not just about projects. So again, if we just take a look at how my portfolio is structured, we will see that first of all, it's on the slides, right? So it's on slides. I can export this into a PDF. I can send that PDF. The recruiter or the designer can go slide by slide. They don't need to understand how my website works, how my website is developed, how I'm having some, fancy interactions on my website. So it's just a slide. It's just like you just press next, 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 next. So that's the first thing that's important. If you ask me, that's important. You will probably find someone that will tell you something else, but in my opinion, slides are still the best way to present your portfolio, because even as a designer, you will have to do presentations about your designs to your stakeholders, to your team members, to your developers, whatever, right? And all of that is very important anyway. So you should really go ahead and, have this in slides, because it's just so handy. You can just do whatever you want with them. You can change one slide. You don't need to get a developer to do your portfolio. You don't need to learn Webflow. You're a designer already, so just design a good presentation deck and just go with that. And it's super easy to maintain, super easy to change, super easy to do whatever. Okay, so that's my first kind of recommendation, let's say. And then the second thing is that you will see that I usually showcase two projects. So one starts here, and we'll go into that one, and one starts here, and then at the end I just have some extra. So what is something extra that I did as a designer? How I try to it doesn't need to be design related, because for me, for example, here I am talking about a system that I did with my coworker. That we came up with a system where if anyone from the company wanted to suggest a feature or recommend the feature, whatever, they would go through that process, and we would get all of these ideas in from all over the company. So it doesn't need to be design related. It can be basically whatever. Okay. So let's go back to my projects here. So at the beginning, I'm just talking a little bit about me, and then the project that I'm working on, that I worked on, that I want to showcase. So again, a little bit about me, just 2 paragraphs, what you're all about, where you worked, and stuff like that, what you want to do, what you like to do in your spare time, stuff like that. Then kind of an overview. As I said, this needs to be maintained a little bit. I just switched jobs. So yeah, I need to add some stuff here. And then I just jumped straight into the case study. Okay. So as you can see, even just starting with this is so much different than what we saw in the previous one, right? So in the previous one, there was actually no context, right? So the designer or recruiter that was looking at that website, he didn't know what this project is. He didn't know what Eurosender is. He didn't know what part of the product I was working on, right? So I just give one slide of a background, just saying, yeah, it was something that was created a long time ago by an external agency. New features, rule changes, and stuff like that was piled on top of it. It was not making sense anymore. And then with COVID hitting, the company I was working at the time really exploded with COVID, because a lot of people started shipping stuff. So yeah, it was really time to, because the revenue and the traffic was getting high, we needed to do something about it because we were losing potential revenue and potential profits, obviously. So next thing I'm talking about is also a little bit about, you know, what the team is, what the team was, sorry, what my task was and what my role in all of this was. So as a task, it was kind of like, you know, what is the overarching goal of this? Obviously, it's improve user experience and improve UI, and then whatever you need to do in the project. But the overarching task was really to create like a future-proof vision of the ordering process. So this is like kind of when you did the order in the product. And yeah, also I also mentioned that this was while working in also a few of smaller projects in parallel. And also, you know, this was to lay the foundation of all the future features that would come to Eurosender. That also meant, you know, as we can see here, was to also create, I think I mentioned it somewhere. But yeah, this basically means that it was also, you know, my task basically to design kind of like the design system that was supporting all of this in the background. And then obviously, you know, my role here was analyzing the current solution and identifying pain points, preparing an extensive report, which you saw in the previous the little reporting pages on the bottom. You saw it in the previous portfolio on my website. But yeah, they just had no context, right? And then how I conducted user interviews, how I need to prepare wireframes, I need to prepare final designs, and yeah, as I mentioned here, prepare and build a design system for it, and then also build an extensive prototype to test the solutions, and obviously collaborate with your team, because as a designer, that's also very, very important. So you've also seen this, but now it's just kind of like a little bit more structured. So I just explained how I usually work. Again, when you're going to be presenting this to your potential employers, it's really important to mention that you don't always work in the same step-by-step process, right? Because not every project is the same. Some projects are big, some are small, some you pick up that some other designers was already working on it. Oh, sorry. So basically, you know, this is kind of like your perfect step-by-step guide, but then on the other hand, you also should mention that it's not always the same, right? But yeah, I kind of structure it and break it down in 3 different groups, which is where I analyze stuff, where I plan on what I'm going to do with that analysis, and then when I create. So this is wireframing, designing, finding solutions, stuff like that. Okay? Then, as I mentioned in my tasks there, and also here on my step-by-step, let's say, process that I do, is obviously analyzing the current problems, okay? And this is really important. This is kind of showcasing how you approach work and how you identify stuff and problems basically in the projects or in the website or product that you're working on, right? So a product designer or UX, UI designer is not just someone that gets stuff on the table and is like, you need to do this. Your responsibility also as a product designer is to know your product in and out. So you need to know basically everything about that product that you're working on. And then you also need to know how to identify problems, okay? So you need to identify, without anyone saying to you, you need to identify where users have problems. And I've identified it here, as you can see, that a lot of people, a lot of our users were dropping off from the first to the second step, of our order process. Okay, so this is what I've identified here. And then as you can see, like I've identified that if a user goes from the first to the second step, then he's like almost guaranteed to create the order. Okay, so this first one really was the problem that I tried to target. Okay, and then I showcase how I got that information, right? Obviously, that one was created with, an analytics tools. But then I went ahead and I started looking for information about what those problems were. So I went to Trustpilot. I was talking to our customers. I reached out to our sales department to see what our bigger clients that they work directly with sales department and account managers had problems with. Okay, so I just kind of piled everything together to this report, which you already seen before, but now you have some more context about how I got this, where I got them, where I got this information, who I reached out to understand that. I also showcase a little bit of my process here, how I color code some stuff that it's easier for me to understand later on and stuff like that. And then also, as a process flow, that obviously I will be creating some ideas and I will be starting to understand, what works, what doesn't, stuff like that. Moving on, searching for the right approach. Obviously, you need to, there's a point in time in your process when you need to go from just having theoretical knowledge and understanding to now trying to sketch out some solutions, right? Obviously, there's gonna be a step that where that happens, basically. So, I've done all of that research. I've understand where specifically there are problems. So now I need to sketch out something that's familiar to, what we already have, but takes care of all that, or basically as much as I can with, with this new approaches and with this new design. So I basically started with wireframing here, just to understand how this could go, what we could do, how the process could start, and basically, I just go ahead and just design a billion things, okay? And then, yeah, I kind of showcase here that I had a very specific problem. So if you can see, one of the biggest pain points of our checkout process was selecting the right service. So it was important to showcase the right information, but also, not take too much UI, too much real estate, and just really keep it simple, right? So I kind of went ahead and designed four. I designed a lot more than four, but I chose four here to showcase four different these selectors of services, right? So I've designed this one, this one, this one, this one, and I've validated all of them, right? So this one, yeah, looks clean, but would present major problems with translations because Eurosender obviously is a multi-language, and most of the things today are basically multi-language already. So translations are really important, are really important for usability of your product. And the thing with translations is that some some languages have long words or long strings of in sentences that didn't just break your UI, right? So it wasn't really scalable from translation. So I needed to discard this one. This one offers the most room. So again, I've identified that having a good UI is not just that it looks pretty in English, but it needs to work in translation. So again, now that I go from this, I've learned that I need to start looking for a design that would allow me to have more room, right? So more room from left to right because of the translations. So this one offers more translations, but looked a little bit weird because if you take a look at it on the whole screen, this gray area here at the top was just like very outstanding, and it was just like kind of like too much in your face, so didn't work. Went to the next one. Yeah, again, a lot of space for translations, but it felt a little bit unstructured because the information is scattered all over, blah 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 blah. Okay, and then the next one, this is the one that I felt personally that it kind of has the best, let's say, the best balance between still looking good, still being understandable, but also present all of the information. So this is what I went with, right? So this is again where I'm showing, okay, I understood the problem. I knew where my users had were experiencing, some friction, and all of these were trying to solve the same problem, but I show you now how I validated these problems, or sorry, these solutions, to really get to the final version of what would be good for the users and what would still work with translations and so on. Next one, it's again, this one is now more specifically talking about interface. So what so I did, this was the old navigation, so it was too many buttons that are not even relevant for this for the task that you're doing. So we changed that. I designed an interface that basically worked on all the devices at the same time, so we didn't need to develop for mobile, for tablet, for small screens, for big screens. So I really wanted to do, because we had some time constraints on this project, what I really wanted to do is that one design basically would fit all of the devices except for mobile. Mobile was separate, but again, it saved a lot of development time. So also you need to show as a designer how you have developers in mind, how your work will affect their work and how much work they would do, and can you do something to reduce the amount of work that they need to do. That's also really important. So input fields, again, I've made them a little bit more accessibility friendly, because this last one, if you would have read my report, it was also reported that some users had problems actually seeing the input field because they were too light. So what I did is I made dark input fields on a light light background, and then also one important thing is that we incorporated kind of like a summary that would always show what you have, what your order is about, what you selected, what the total is, and everything. So that was also really important to have it as a sticky thing on the side. Then I'm moving on how how I validated everything. Okay, so what I did was, I wanted to test all of my ideas, wanted to test all of my designs, but this was like peak COVID problem. So I use Maze to gather some insights, and then I have I was validating my ideas as much as I needed to get from what's on the left to get from what's on the right. Okay, so I designed an interface, I showed it to customers, and it was like, I got feedback from them. So what do the little icons mean? Just write out the details, I felt like the names of the options weren't as clear. This is not design related, but it's also very UX important that, users understand basically everything about your product. So we started to discuss, to change the name of the services that we provided, because the current names weren't making sense to the users. I gathered all of this. I went back, I fixed it. I tried to find a better solution, and I did that as much as I needed to get, to some. It was simple to do, easy flow, easy to set date, everything. So again, how I got the user feedback, and then how I used that to make the improvements. Okay, so those improvements, again, here I go into detail about how I achieved those improvements. So, people were, users were not really making sense of what everything means. So what I did is I removed some non-important fields, which was content and I think value. And basically what I just did is I simplified the overall UI, right? Because here there are 6 input fields and 2 of them are big, 4 of them are small. I simplified it very much because I've obviously removed the single one whole row So there's less work for the user to do. So obviously that will be easier for them to use, right? But yeah, I'm just showcasing here. Yeah, this is what we have. This is what we did. This is what you identified as a problem, and we solved it. Next one. Yeah, again, just showcasing some stuff that I did. As we were testing, we kind of figured out that we had like a whole step in our process that didn't make any sense. So we had this summary step before you went into payment, right? And this step was basically just to show you information. There was nothing else you could have done on this step. So we were just like, okay, users are reporting that this doesn't make sense, right? So we went back, we checked it, and we really understood now that this whole step was really just like a friction in a flow that we created, but it had absolutely no value. It added no value. So they had absolutely nothing to do with it. So we just removed the whole summary, this whole step, and we actually designed this summary on the right, which just has like a short breakdown. But if you if you were to press on this small arrows here, you would have a little bit more information about that, right? So we just removed basically the whole step just by listening to users and understanding that they're having problems with that. And then another short one was the payment methods used to be like a horizontal section, and then I moved it into a vertical section because there were some reports coming in from other departments in the company that we're going to be adding some new payment methods, and just the horizontal one obviously wasn't scalable anymore, so we needed to come up with a vertical one. So not all your decisions also need to be based on the users, right? That's why you have internal stakeholders. That's why you need to collaborate with your other departments, so you get to know this stuff and you don't make decisions that will basically hurt you and are not dependent on the user. So you need to be talking also about with your other departments, and you need to understand, what the other departments are planning, so you can also design accordingly. So this change was not done for the users; it was done for the company, because we would have a problem. So the users would have a problem if we didn't understand the problems that we have in the company. And then at the end, it's just a few short screenshots about the UI I did. So finally, this is where I show like the final UI, and as you can see, it's just like a few screenshots, and that's basically it. And then at the end, you need to be kind of like retrospective of yourself as a designer, right? So first of all, I'll go here into the details of the impact that I had on the project. So yeah, I sent up an extensive design guideline, I improved the overall experience, and I provided clarity and ease of use for the average user. This is my impact on the project, right? And then what I learned, so again, you really need to go back into yourself in retrospection and really understand, what you've learned here. What have you done wrong that you've identified that you've done wrong, and you're going to be doing it better in the future. This is really important, not just you as a designer, as design you're going to work on, but how you're going to involve as a person, and as a designer, as a how you're gonna go on, and that this one small simple screen slide can actually tell your future possible employer a lot. So it makes him think that you do think about your processes, and then you do think about the things you do, and that you do know how to identify problems in your own process and how to solve them. So as you can see, yeah, I learned that the testing and analysis of my solutions, of my design, should and could be done much earlier than I did. So I don't use a lot of my time for something that doesn't work. Involve the team as much as possible. This is how I at first didn't identify this problem with the payment options, right? But then after talking to them, thankfully at the end of the project, I was still able to change that. But imagine if we were to design or develop the horizontal payment options, and then a month later someone from the other department says, oh yeah, we're going to add 3 more payment options, right? So talking to the people inside of your company is also really important. And yeah, obviously, as I mentioned before, you really need to know your product in and out. You need to know as much as humanly possible about the product, because there are always some edge cases, and it's hard to map out your user's journey if you don't know the product and if you don't understand it. And that's pretty much it. And as you can see, this is this also took a lot more time for me to explain, as the other one, because that was just like a few slides based on I don't even know what, and then just a few screenshots about my UI. So again, to kind of summarize everything, it's really important for you to not showcase your UI. As a good product designer or UX UI designer, it's kind of like already expected that you do great UI. And also, great UI is also very subjective, honestly. It depends on your target group, it depends on your user, it depends on each individual designer. Some see something as beautiful that others don't. So UI really is just like a given. We just kind of like assume that you know that, right? But what's important as a UX or as a product designer is how you understand those problems, how you react to those problems, how you identify them and everything. So you really need to be showcasing your whole process instead of just like some random, UI that you did for some project. So again, I hope you find this useful. I rambled on for 37 minutes almost. So yeah, I really hope you learned something. If you have any problems, reach out to a designer, reach out to an experienced designer, get their info, get their feedback, and get hired easier, right? So thank you guys for jumping into me, for again listening for me ramble on to almost 40 minutes. I hope you again learned something, and I hope that you will have much more success in finding your next job, your first job, and that I had something to do with it, with sharing this knowledge. So thanks again, and see you in the next one.